Okay, so somebody starts on the low carbohydrate diet. Let's say, they're seeing good progress and all of a sudden that progress is kind of slowing down. This is a time where I think it's really nice to diagnose a few things. Stall Slayer, how do we get past this? We mentioned some really basic things that you can do. What are some of those basic things in your mind?
Well, when someone's on a low carb or ketogenic diet specifically, there's the two first things I look for are too many carbs. Like, have they gotten a little complacent about the carb intake? Maybe they just don't realize, like, ooh, I'm back to eating a lot more carbohydrate than I realized. And then the other is the fat. And nobody likes to hear that. But if you're having a hard time losing body fat on a low carb or keto diet, then your fat from your food is not unlimited. I hate when people say keto is a high fat diet. Now, maybe it is for epilepsy. Maybe there are certain like medical applications where keto, you do have to have a particular ratio or something. For weight loss or diabetes and stuff like that, keto is not a high fat diet. What it really is a very low carb diet. You don't have to be like melting butter on everything and melting cheese on everything and having your macros and your percentages. Those are the two biggest things that I see happen are too many carbs and too much fat. So
Yeah.
that's what I look at first.
Yeah, those are two of the things that are very, very high up on my list. I like how Dr. Gary Fettke told us that he defines it now, where he calls it just healthy fat, not high fat, low
Yeah,
carbohydrate. And I thought that was
yeah.
totally fair. And it's hard for people to understand because initially, like when somebody starts on low carb, I am totally fine with you eating a lot of high fat things. Like if you want to do the fat bombs, if you want to do tons of butter in the coffee, if you can, eat tons of eggs and cook in lots and lots of butter, like that's fine for me for now. If I can make you get really satiated and help you lose interest in the sugary carbohydrates, but that's a lever that has to come down eventually. And I remember, I never forget this. A client texted me one day early on when we were learning about this, and she was like, "Yeah, last night I was under my fat macros, so I drank like 4 ounces of olive oil." And I was like, something might be might be wrong with that." With the carbohydrates too, you did mention like a lack of complacency, like a strictness initially, and then they kind of creep in. I wonder if you would agree with this. I think of it almost as two ways. Low carbohydrate could be a low amount of carbohydrates, but if that's like you're having like a Jolly Rancher like every 30 minutes, and it's a low amount of carbohydrates, but it's really frequent and you're sending that carbohydrate signal too frequently, I think that can be just as much of a problem, if not more.
Oh, that's huge. I don't see too many people doing that, but it's more like people are, and I first of all, I totally agree with you about if somebody's brand new to this, or if they need a reset, if they're like kind of all over the map and they're trying to really get back to basics. I don't encourage calorie counting, macros, anything, even the fat. Like, just focus on keeping the carbs really low. And if that means you're eating a giant stick of salami or a giant thing of pepperoni, I don't care. Do it. Get over the hump of just being without the carbs. Then we'll work on portions and stuff with those fattier foods. But like, yeah, if you want to eat a bunch of cheese, now you have to understand you might not be losing weight in that initial period if that's what you're doing, but that's fine. This is a process. Let's get your body accustomed to being without the carbs, and then we'll tweak things. So I totally agree. But with the what was the other thing about the
Well, it's just
fat?
like the frequency of the
Oh,
carbohydrate
right,
intake.
right, with the carbs. It's how do I think what I see more is people being fooled by the marketing now. This is keto ice cream, the keto cereal, the keto granola. Some people can have that stuff and do fine. A lot of us can't. A lot of us are more sensitive to like the sugar alcohols or the filler, the tapioca fiber, whatever they're putting in this stuff. So some of us are eating a lot more carbohydrate than we realize because we're like, oh, but it says keto. Well, so that's what I see a lot more, I think. And and sometimes just a little bit, like depending on somebody's life situation, like some of the parents, like, oh, I just took the one thing off my kid's plate or the one thing from the desk at work. And you don't realize those little onesie twosies really build up over the day.
They add up for sure. Yeah, the marketing thing is sad. I still remember the first time I saw, I want to say it was Slim Fast, it's Slim Fast Fat Bomb at Walmart. There was like $11. And I picked this up and it floated off into the atmosphere. It was so light. It was less than 3 ounces of total weight, 6 servings of like half an ounce each. Like, I don't care what that is. That is not going to fill you up.
It's funny you should say that, because look, full confession, everybody. Sometimes I look at those packages like, ooh, that looks so good. Like, ooh, maybe I should try that, just as an experiment. Like, I'm the same way. Good thing I'm so cheap, because I'll look at it like, I'm not paying $9 for this two-ounce box of food. Like, that's ridiculous. So it's good to be frugal in that regard, because
Yes.
I'm not going to spend that much money for something I probably shouldn't buy in the first place.
That's right. How many eggs can you buy with that $9? It's so much better,
Exactly.
and that's so much more
Yeah.
delicious.
I mean, that's
Maybe
two
now,
pounds of ground beef if it's on sale, right?
exactly, exactly. No, that's so true. This is probably a good time. I'm glad you wrote about this to talk a little bit about those sweeteners. And some people say like swapping the sugar for a more healthy sweetener, stevia, and those erythritols and all these other things. I have a certain opinion about that, and I'm glad you wrote about it. Can you tell us what your opinion is on that?
I have a very controversial stance on those things. I don't give any blanket recommendations, but most people can do well with artificial sweeteners, and some of the sugar alcohols, not all, some of the sugar alcohols do induce more of an effect on glucose and insulin than others, but our artificial sweeteners are different. They're like, the molecules are completely different. There's just too many thousands upon thousands of people who have done great on low carb diets over the past 50 to 60 years while they use sweet and low, saccharin, sucralose, aspartame, stevia, whatever. There are some people who are more sensitive. And there are like for me, I put a pack of sweetener in my coffee every morning, but that sweet coffee does not induce more cravings. Like, I have my coffee and I'm good for the day. I don't then crave a blueberry muffin an hour later or a donut. But there are some people who do. So if you're somebody out there who just that taste of sweet, even from like fake sweetener or from these sugar alcohols, if that induces cravings and you have to battle that all day, then stay away from those. But I'm not convinced by the science regarding the safety of this stuff. The microbiome, that's a whole separate thing we could get into. I'm not convinced that any of this is all that big a deal. And that stuff, the fear mongering against this stuff is just going to be a deal breaker for some people to even try this. Like, if you tell me, okay, not only do I have to now give up my bread and my bagel, my pasta, my rice, my fruit, and I can't have diet soda, and I can't have Splenda in my coffee, and I can't have a sugar-free thing, they're not even going to try this. And the reality is, every damn keto doctor out there has tons of patients who drink diet soda and who put Splenda in their coffee and who use sugar-free Jello or whatever, and they lose 100 pounds and they reverse their type 2 diabetes and they do all the good things. So I'm sorry, that's way more than you probably wanted to know. Like,
No,
if
that's
people
fantastic.
out there prefer to not use that stuff, don't use it. You don't have to, but you can if you want to, if you are happy with the results that you get.
Yeah.
If you're using them and you're happy with how things are going, don't let the food police scare you.
Yeah, and I think the parameter that you said, the cravings, follow the cravings. Does this make you crave more food? Take it out. If not, you're probably going to be okay. It's kind of like small pickings. It's not going to make that big of a difference in the big picture. So I really love and appreciate that explanation. So once we've addressed energy in the diet, either too much fat or either too much carbohydrate, what are some other things further down the list of basic things that people might not be aware of?
Um, there's a whole chapter in that book, The Stall Slayer, on thyroid. And my next book, actually, my next book is not going to be a keto book at all. It's going to be about thyroid. I'm on thyroid medicine myself. if there's anything in the world I'm more passionate about than low carb diets, it's thyroid. And so I see this a lot, probably because the people who come to me for help, sort of like out of the box garden variety keto isn't working. So I have kind of a biased population that I'm working with, because if keto was working well for them, they wouldn't contact me for help. So it's more likely that they're going to have some underlying hormonal issue. So I see it a lot, either undiagnosed hypothyroidism or improperly treated. So there's a ton of people out there, maybe someone listening or watching is one of them, who take Synthroid or levothyroxine, who still feel terrible. They have all their same signs and symptoms. They still can't lose weight, yet they're on thyroid medicine. And there's a lot of people who are told, oh, it's not your thyroid's normal. And if they read the book, they'll see the problem is that most doctors only check for like 1 or 2 hormones when they give you a thyroid test, when there's actually more like 6 or 7 that they could be checking. And very, very often in the 1 or 2 that they normally check, those could be normal, but one or the others is way off. And it's just not a standard test. And I see this all the time. And I'm not a doctor, so I can't diagnose anybody, but I can give them the information.
Yeah.
But I see that all the time. That's a huge roadblock to fat loss, even if somebody is doing a strict keto diet and exercises. But I will say, and I know I'm very long-winded, I'm sorry. I know these people are sticking to the diet because they bring me their blood work. Everything looks good, right? Glucose and insulin are low, triglycerides are low, the HDL is high. Everything looks good. They just can't lose weight.
Mm.
Very often the total cholesterol and LDL are elevated because that comes potentially from low thyroid. So when I see a pattern like that, then I either suspect thyroid, or they already know and they're on that levothyroxine and it's not working.
That's so interesting. I'm wondering. I've heard this story before, and I think there's a lot to it for sure. When you're trying to get the right markers measured, is it terribly difficult for people to go to their doctor and say what things they want? I've heard that can be a huge hurdle.
Unfortunately, most of the time with thyroid, it's a battle. And hopefully my thyroid book, it's not going to be out till sometime next year, unfortunately, but hopefully that is going to change some minds in the medical world about this. But it is very difficult. They just weren't trained in this. And even, God bless them, even some endocrinologists who should be the specialists in this were trained in a very, very old, outdated paradigm. And the good news is, in the US, this doesn't hold for other countries, but in the US, you can order your own labs, almost anything you want, without a doctor, except in New York, New Jersey, and Rhode Island. Any
Wow.
other state, there are several different websites where you can do your own labs. You can get a complete thyroid panel, and it's not even that pricey. It's worth every penny. The struggle then is, once you have the test results, to get your doctor to give you the right medication if you need some. It's
I
still
see.
a battle, but the testing, at least, you might be able to get done regardless of your doctor.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. Well, thank you for that. We're very much looking forward to your book. It seems to be a very complicated topic, and the more I learn about it, the more I don't know why this surprises me, but the more I learn that I know nothing about it, absolutely nothing. And so we really appreciate all that research. Anything else as far as breaking through a stall? Anything else that you find is like a kind of usual suspect?
Yeah, so I guess going along with the fat, the sort of overdoing the fat, for some people, and I don't want to like scare anyone, some people seem to do well when they either cut out dairy or just cut out cheese.
I'm gonna ask.
And there's a lot of people out there who would say that it's something inherent to dairy itself, whether it's like inflammatory peptides or who knows what. Um, I don't know whether that's the bigger factor, or just, like, we all hate the C word, but the calories. If you stop eating cheese, and you had previously been like binging on cheese, or, like having a big old block of cheese every couple of days, or the heavy cream is another big one. And or butter. And if you cut all of that out, well, was it the dairy itself, or was it just that total amount of fat adding up? So and nuts. I mean, oh my gosh, who couldn't pack away a whole bag of nuts
Totally.
and not even be full, right? So that's those are two easy things, like nuts and cheese, to either eliminate altogether, or one of the suggestions I give people is to use them as a garnish. Like don't sit down and make cheese your snack or meal. Like put a slice of cheese on a burger patty, sprinkle some cheese on your salad or on your chili or tacos or whatever. Don't make it the main event. Same thing
Yeah,
with nuts. Like, do not be sitting on the couch with the bag of almonds from Trader Joe's, because you will be sorry. Yeah, hand to mouth syndrome. If put some chopped nuts on your salad, sprinkle some on whatever as a garnish. Don't make nuts your meal, but
yeah,
for the people out there that are eating nuts and cheese and you're doing great, keep eating nuts and cheese. Like, this
that's right.
is only if you think they're a problem for you, but
I,
those are like the two biggest, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Again, we should point out for the listener, like we are talking about a specific context here. So if these things are working for you, don't change anything. Keep going. Like, we're talking about the people that this is currently not working for, and those are foods that are on a short list. That I agree, nuts and seeds, I think, can be okay initially, but over time probably need to reduce. The dairy and the cheese thing, I think, is another one. I think certain fruits, especially if you're like tracking apple in my fitness pal and you're eating two a day, but they're like softball size apples, when my fitness pal thinks it's maybe like a normal size apple.
Yeah.
Those types of things I tend to get really suspicious of over time.